Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. There is very often a difference between our plan, the way that we think things ought to go, and whatever God's plan turns out to be instead. It was not my plan for all this snow to happen this winter. I didn't ask for it, didn't request it. I didn't fill out a form and said, "Please give me more snow." I didn't turn it into anyone. And if any of you did that, then please stop. If any of you have been praying for snow, I assure you I've had enough, and so have the rest of us, so just stop, okay? Thursday night, I was trying to head over to church. I didn't want to walk on the sidewalks because they were coated in ice, and I thought I'll just drive over instead. But my car got stuck in the driveway because there was no traction anywhere, and I didn't have time to go, so I just left it parked at an angle in front of the sidewalk, blocking the walkway for everybody else, and I walked over to church and almost fell over about 20 times. And that wasn't my plan, but that was the way that it turned out that day. But God's plan isn't just about the weather. God's plan is also about our behavior and how we respond when other people mistreat us. I have two examples of that. I was shopping, and I went to the self-checkout line because those are usually faster. But unfortunately for me, all 6 of the checkout lanes were filled up by people who had full carts of food. They had vegetables, they had cans of soup, they had whatever they had. It didn't matter because they were in my way. And they were selfish by going to those self-checkout lines because they were going very slowly. And they were really ruining it for me and for everybody else. And my immediate instinct was to go up to their cart and just tip it over on the floor and say, "It's my turn now. I'm taking over this lane." I couldn't do that. And that wouldn't be what God would want me to do. But that was my natural human instinct. There was another man. I was at Wally World, and the man was playing music very loudly on his phone. He didn't have headphones in. He was just playing it as he was walking through the store. It was very rude. I didn't like it, but tripping him and running away would have been the wrong thing to do, so I didn't do it. That was what my natural human instinct was, though. And just from those two examples, or from better examples I'm sure that you could come up with, there's a difference between what our plan would be and what God's plan turns out to be. God says, "Forgive, show mercy," in the same sort of way that I have shown it to you. And that's what we see in Genesis 45, with Joseph forgiving his brothers, one of the most significant instances of forgiveness really in the entire Bible. The story starts out sort of in the middle. There is a Latin term for that, which you might have expected. It's, I forget what it is, but I looked it up and I forgot what it was because I don't know Latin. It's in medias something or other. And I don't say that to be pretentious because I don't even remember what it is. But I looked it up because it's a storytelling device that dates back to the Greek poet Homer. He wrote the Odyssey, and he started out his story in the middle. And William Shakespeare also wrote stories like this. In the story of Hamlet, it starts out after something has already happened. Hamlet's father had already passed away. Spoiler alert, I'm sorry. Edgar Allan Poe writes this way in The Telltale Heart. And I'm sure nowadays you can think of many instances of movies and TV shows that start out with something crazy happening. Maybe somebody's kitchen is on fire, somebody's homework is gone, and the narrator saying, "I bet you're wondering how I got myself into this mess." That's where we are, right here in Genesis. Joseph is forgiving his brothers after something had happened. To say that something had happened is really selling it short, because his brothers hated him and sold him into slavery, and now Joseph is forgiving them. But to really understand, you have to go back to the beginning of the story. The story started out when Joseph's father decided that he was going to be the favorite son. He was one of the youngest sons, but he was the favorite. And his father Jacob gave him gifts that were better than what his other brothers got. One day, Joseph got a wonderful multicolored robe, and it wasn't his birthday. There was no special occasion. He just got it because he was the favorite son. And Joseph flaunted it. He wore it around all over the place. And every time his brothers saw him wearing it, they got more and more angry at him because Joseph knew he was the favorite, and his brothers knew that as well. Joseph's father, Jacob, also made him the tattletale. He said, "Go and look and see how your brothers are doing. Go and report back to me whether they're being obedient or not." And when his brothers saw Joseph coming, they were angry because they knew that he was coming to check in on them because their father didn't trust them by themselves. And not only was Joseph coming to check up on them, but he was wearing that robe, that symbol of his father's love for him and not for his brothers. And Joseph was wearing that robe because he was kind of a punk. He could have recognized the situation and said, "It's not right that my father loves me more than my brothers. I'm going to respect their feelings and not try to poke at them," but he did the opposite. Joseph had dreams too. He had dreams from God, so it's not like he was just making these up, but he decided to share them in an unhelpful way. He had a dream that the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowed down to Joseph. It was a prophecy of what would come to pass in the future. Now, Joseph knew that if he told his brothers this dream, which was in a very not so veiled way saying, "Your father and mother and your brothers are going to bow down to you," he could have kept it to himself. But he decided to share it so that all of them knew, once again, I'm Joseph, I'm better than you, I have my father's love. In fact, everybody likes me more than you. So when his brothers saw Joseph coming to check up on them, they were angry. They wanted to kill him. That was even what they said. They said, "Let's kill him." But instead, they threw him into a pit while they waited, and then they said, "You know what? Let's not just kill him, because he is our brother, after all. Let's sell him and get some money out of it." So they sold him as a slave, and he ended up in Egypt. And then, after Joseph had taken some time and recognized what he had done over those years was wrong, we eventually get to this point where he forgives his brothers. And it's really remarkable the way that he was able to overcome generations of favoritism. That's right, generations. Joseph was the favorite, but his father, Jacob, was not. Jacob was one of a set of twins. He had a brother named Esau. His father was named Isaac, of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob fame. This is the story of the family. Isaac had two sons, Esau and Jacob. He liked Esau better. Esau was a hunter. Esau was the strong son. Esau would go out and have adventures. Jacob stayed at home. He stayed with his mother. He was a mama's boy. He liked to cook. Good for him. But he wasn't the favorite. And Jacob carried that around inside himself all his life, knowing that he wasn't his father's favorite. He had to lie and cheat and steal to try to get any sort of blessing from his father. Not that he should have done that, but that's what he did. That was his plan. That was the way that he dealt with it. He lied to his father to his face, dressed up as Esau to try and get the blessing away from him. Didn't make things go better with Esau. Esau hated his brother. Isaac picked a favorite. And he picked a favorite because he was also a favorite. That's right, even Abraham had a favorite son. You have to go back another generation. Abraham had two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Abraham had been promised by God, "You are going to have a son. And I'm going to, from that one son that you're going to have, I'm going to give you a great family. It's going to be as numerous as the stars in the sky, as the sand on the seashore. You're going to have a huge family." And Abraham waited, and he waited, and he waited, and he was an old man, and his wife was past the age that she should have been able to have a child, and Abraham said, "I still haven't had a son." So maybe God's plan is that I sleep with my wife's maid and have a baby with her. That was not God's plan. That was what Abraham thought the best thing to do was. That was his plan. So he had a son named Ishmael, but then when his wife got pregnant, she said, "Get rid of that other kid. I don't want him around here. I don't want him around my son. He's not getting anything. He's not getting any of our inheritance. The promise is not for him. Get him out of here." And so he kicked out his own son. And from that time on, Ishmael and Isaac, the two sons, and their families after them, well, they were at war with each other. So that's the whole story. Now you've seen from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to Joseph the favoritism that has gone on, the years and years of siblings hating one another, of parents not getting along, families wanting to kill each other. And now we get to this moment right here, and Joseph forgives his brothers. And it's not easy to forgive family. It's hard enough to forgive your friends. It's hard enough to forgive your friends when they go out for a night on the town and they don't invite you, when they don't text you back, when they don't reply to your emails or your Facebook messages. It's hard enough with your friends, but with your family. When parents pick favorites, when siblings decide that they like some of each other more than the others. Maybe the oldest is the least popular. Maybe the youngest is. I don't know. But family does that. It's hard to forgive family. And people pick all sorts of things that they think are going to be the solution to the problem. We've seen in this family all the different things that they tried, and none of them worked out. None of them broke this multi-generational cycle of hatred and bitterness and resentment and favoritism. The only thing that worked was forgiveness. When Joseph said, I know what my brothers did to me, and maybe to some extent I deserved it, but what they did was wrong. I forgive them anyway. It's remarkable, the difference that can make. And all of a sudden, his brothers came close to him, and they weren't afraid of him anymore. And he hugged them, and they cried, and they talked with one another. And all those years, over 100 years of hatred, was gone. That's the sort of thing that God's plan is made up of. That's the sort of thing that Jesus offers. Because he calls us a part of his family. He says, I have made you my brothers and my sisters and my mother. That's what I've done for you. I've brought you in and made you a part of my family. And yet, out of all the people that we are now a part of the family with, God is often our least favorite. He tells us what to do in his word. He's very clear. It's not hard for us to understand what he would want us to do, and yet he is the one that we listen to maybe the least frequently. Yeah, I'll listen to my family, I'll listen to my friends, but as for what God has to say, he can keep his opinions to himself. And if somebody wrongs me, I'm going to get even with them. You better believe that. I don't let people step on me. If somebody tries to push me, I will push them right back. If they poke me, I will poke them. If they push me, I will shove them to the floor. I will get even. I will do it. I won't let my rights be taken away. That's not what Jesus tells us to do. That's not what his will is. Do you really think that you're going to break the cycle of hatred and resentment in your own group of friends, in your own family, by getting even? I assure you that you won't. And if you don't make God your favorite, if you choose to follow your own advice or somebody else's and reject what he has to say, if you reject him as a part of your family, how do you think he ought to treat you? Do you think you deserve to be forgiven? Did Joseph's brothers deserve to be forgiven? They didn't. They hated their own brother. They wanted to kill him, and then instead of killing him, they did the next best thing. They sold him for money. That's an awful, terrible thing to do. But Joseph said, I see how God has been working through all of this. It wasn't you who sent me here. 3 times he says that it wasn't you who sent me here. God sent me here. Somehow, God had decided that he was going to work through all of this for the benefit of everyone. Somehow, it was God's plan that no matter how much we didn't listen to him, he was going to send his son to bring forgiveness and mercy. Somehow it was God's plan that no matter how much people rejected Jesus while he was on earth, that was not going to stop him, but he was going to live a perfect life and die for the sins of everyone and forgive them. That was God's plan, to send his son to forgive you, and so you have been forgiven. For everything wrong that you've ever done, for every time you've gotten even with someone, for every time that you haven't been willing to forgive your own family, for every time that you have been the cause of the problem, you are forgiven. Jesus has taken all your sins away. That's maybe not what we would have encouraged God to do if he was a person, but that's what his plan was, to forgive you. And Joseph comments. He says, I see now, looking back, how God was working through all of this. It wasn't his plan that I be sold into slavery, but he worked through it so that all these people could be saved. You see, there was a famine going on at the time. Joseph said, we've gone through 2 years, we've got 5 years to go. But because God brought me here, God gave me dreams, like he gave me when I was a kid, but this time I'm using them for the right reason. I see that his plan was that we would save up the food and be able to provide for these people when there's a famine. Not just for the people of Egypt, where Joseph was, but for any other nations or people that might come in and need help, that we could offer them help. I see how God is working for good, how God is using me. And Joseph was a young punk for sure. But now he was using him as a responsible adult to care for his brothers who hated him, to show love to a nation that had enslaved him. That was what God's plan was. It's not what we would have suggested to Joseph, but it's what God wanted him to do. God's plan is often different from our plan, and usually that's good. If you saw a disobedient, unruly child running around, starting fights, talking back to his parents, the best solution might be to discipline that child better. Or the right solution might be to show love to that child who's acting out and has not been able to find love anywhere else. Maybe that's what God would have us do. It might not be our first idea, but then again, God's plan is often different from man's plan. And God's plan was to give you forgiveness and mercy and give it to you for free. And you are forgiven through your Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.